Hi guys! It's really been a while since I've sat down in front of the camera to do a video because what with the summer solstice and then I was showing you prayer beads and stuff like that. And also I've just been really busy. But in between all this madness, for the last month and a half, maybe through June and then through the beginning of July, I've been thinking a lot again about witchcraft and spellcraft and magic and intention setting and stuff of that nature. I did make a video about magic before. I think it was called Thoughts on Magic, but at that point I was still very cagey about the whole thing. I wasn't really sure where I stood on it. I just didn't really enjoy the idea of incorporating anything that sounded like magic or looked like magic into my practice at all, despite the fact that my spiritual practice is very ritual based. I'm definitely not the kind of person who just meditates and doesn't really use ritual because I don't believe in certain things. Ritual has always been very important for me, and my spiritual practice absolutely revolves around it. So in that sense, if you see ritual as being a form of magic, then in that sense I have always been using magic in my practice. But I think my biggest issue with the word magic is actually the word itself, because the words magic, witchcraft, they sort of, obviously they pertain to the supernatural. The general definition of those words is that it is the harnessing of a supernatural power or supernatural force. And I do appreciate that a lot of witches and pagans don't see it as being supernatural. They go by, say, the energy model, where they believe that they are manipulating an energy that is natural, that is just part of the universe. It's just all around us, and that we can tap into it and mold it and change it and work with it to impose our will on the world. I wouldn't say though that I really abide by the energy energy model either. I've always kind of assumed that I would be coming at magic from a psychological model, and I think, to be honest, it just was never meaningful enough for me to actually sit down and form a magical practice, because the psychological model made it seem sort of like, well, okay, this is like an alternative to the kind of work that I already do, the kind of self-work that I already do, say journaling or, you know, shadow work, using tarot, that kind of stuff. So for a long time I was quite happy to have the two things quite separate. I saw my spiritual practice as being in some way separate to my self-work and my you know, using tarot and things like that. They were two kind of separate things, even though there's definitely quite a lot of overlap, and I would sometimes use tarot in ritual, and there's definitely a lot of bleeding back and forth. But it wasn't until fairly recently that I realised that, well, first of all, there was no particular reason for me to make this sharp divide, that my spiritual practice is very definitely caught up in personal development for me. It is quite difficult. I've talked about that before, I made a video about that before. It is quite difficult to sort of figure out where one ends and the other one begins. And I realised that maybe I should embrace that a bit more. Because a lot of my spiritual practice and ritual practice these days has basically consisted of doing work on the astral, and that's something I'm going to talk about now in a second. It's just consisted of sort of active imagination. And that, to an extent, or from my perspective, is primarily kind of like self-work, because I'm going within, I'm working with images that are arising in my own mind, and yeah, it is essentially self-work. So even if I'm doing it from a context of devotion or from a context of a ritual practice, at the end of the day the line was becoming more and more blurred, I suppose you could say. More and more in the last couple of months I've also been coming to see the realm of imagination and dreams as being the astral. I know a couple of people see it this way, particularly people who kind of hover on the line between the psychological model and the energy model when it comes to magic. So, but for a long time I kind of didn't use the word astral plane or astral, because it denoted to me a belief that wasn't part of my belief system at all. It suggested to me a belief in duality, in other planes, in a spirit world, or some sort of magical world that is separate to ours. And obviously as a monistic pantheist, that didn't really make sense for me at all, because I see everything as being one. everything as being made of the same substance. And to me, there aren't kind of worlds beyond this world that we can't see. There are definitely levels of experience beyond this world, though, that we can't see. And more I started to realize that a lot of this terminology that I have been sort of eschewing and thinking that's nothing to do with me, I really can't bring that on board into my spiritual practice. A lot of that I've started to realize that it's more the way that I understand other people's beliefs that has been blocking me from using those terms, because actually a lot of those terms are very useful for me in explaining things, explaining experiences, and explaining the world for me. It's just that I have a different lens of understanding through which I see these things. So basically, I used to always call what other people would call astral traveling, I would call active imagination, or maybe even kind of going into lucid dreaming. I would consider, trance as just being a sort of psychological thing where you again go into that state of pure imagination where you're tapping into the unconscious and stuff like that. And I just didn't really think about the idea of other worlds at all. It just wasn't part of my belief system. But yeah, like I say, more and more I've actually been embracing the word astrals. For me, the astral is basically a place where the conscious mind meets the unconscious mind. So you're letting go of conscious control, you're letting go of the logical mind, and you're allowing yourself to slip into the dream world. Now, more often than not, what I actually call the astral plane is the dream world, my dream world. And my dream world for me is something that I can access while conscious. Currently, I can only do that on a certain level. But something that I've been experiencing recently, because I've actually been paying more attention to my dreams, and I find that the more I think about dreaming, even if I'm not necessarily writing them down every day, the more I think about dreaming and dreams and think about my own dreams, the more I remember them, and also the more I lucid dream. Or one of them in particular was really, really intense. And I had this realization that, my unconscious believes that the dream world is actually real. That's one thing. When I'm lucid dreaming, I 100%, my main sort of realization while lucid dreaming is this is real. This is existence. This is just as real as waking life. So the dream world for me on some level is just as real as the waking life. And that's not really such a surprise, because that is something that I have intellectually believed for a while, even though it hasn't actually been my experience, if you know what I mean. I've had a bit of a disconnect with that kind of concept, where I've been kind of going, do I really believe that the realm of the imagination or the dream world is just as real as physical reality? I don't know. But then after having this lucid dream, it really opened up a lot of new ideas for me and new possibilities for how I can see the world and how I can understand how things work. So essentially, I would like to work towards a point where I can get into a trance state and access that sort of lucid dreaming state from a conscious state, if you see what I mean, which is essentially what I understand trance work to be. So I've started to actually, not only has this really reinforced for me how real the dream world really is and how important the astral plane or our dream world or whatever you want to call it, how important that is. It's also made me start to think of the state of lucid dreaming or the astral as being the other world. And it started to help me see a lot of parallels between experiences that I have and experiences that people have with, say, spirits or deities and things like that. Another thing I want to come back to is the question of all this kind of being psychological or happening in your head, because that's kind of the major difference between my understanding of what astral projection or traveling over to the other world or whatever it is. The main difference between my beliefs and the beliefs of other people who do this kind of work is that for me, you could say that it's all happening in your head, that it's not really happening. It's not happening in the physical realm or the physical plane or in a physical way. Yeah, because people like that seem to believe in a separate physical realm, if you see what I mean. That there's this kind of physical realm, but then there's another astral realm or spirit realm or whatever that is in some way physical or in some way tangible, and that some part of them, some tangible part of them, like their soul or part of their soul or their ethereal being, actually physically makes that movement. Whereas for me, it happens all in the head. But the funny thing is that actually as a monist, while some monists, particularly if they're atheists, monism can actually be really reductive And they can end up being in this situation where they only believe in the physical, they only believe in what we can see, and it becomes a very sort of mechanistic worldview. Whereas for me, actually, monism essentially means that when things are happening in my head, they're absolutely not just happening in my head. They're happening everywhere, and everything is happening in my head all at once because of that that connection that I have with everything. Yeah, so that also reinforces the idea that anything that happens in your head is not necessarily not real. And this isn't just because I think a lot of people who abide by that idea that what happens in your head is actually real, even if they don't have supernatural beliefs. A lot of people who say that, what they mean a lot of the time is that you experience it also, so therefore it is real to you. When it comes down to the nitty gritty and the nuts and bolts of it, they may still say, right, well, yeah, it's not actually happening outside of your actual brain. This is all an experience that is happening, you know, within your head. It's just that it's real because it is part of it's just as much a part of your experience, and at the end of the day our experience of the outside world is also happening inside our head, because the only way that we can create the input that we get, the only way we can create the material, or the visual material, the sensual material, is in our brains. Sure, it's coming in through our eyes and hands and everything, but it's being translated into a world or into an experience in our head. So yeah, everything happens in your head. But I think it goes a little bit beyond that for me, because yeah, it's in my head, but also it's kind of not. Because I believe in connection between myself and everything. And it's all a bit hazy for me, because I'm still not exactly sure where I fall on how consciousness works, what my consciousness is, whether or not my consciousness can connect up to other consciousnesses, whether everything else is conscious, what conscious even means. I'm starting more and more basically to see the state of, say, lucid dreaming, which is to me being fully on the astral plane. That sort of state between consciousness and unconsciousness. The way I see it is when you're conscious and you're experiencing the world, you're experiencing it from what is physically just near you. You know, you're seeing what is physically near you, that's what's going in. When you're unconscious, when you're dreaming, you're getting all this content, you're experiencing a world that is, sure, on one level, it's literally just happening in your head, so there's nothing, so in a way you could say it's not connected to anything else, that it's actually just, it's just purely within you. But also I see it as when you're dreaming, and especially when you're lucid dreaming, like I say, that you're actually experiencing something a lot more transcendental than that. And that in a way you're sort of becoming more connected, and you can experience more of the world than you can when you're awake. My understanding of it is that space and time, because we're all one in my belief system, because we all kind of, you know, everything came out of this one infinitely tiny point. That's pretty much, we're pretty much sure on that with science, you know, that's pretty much there. We don't understand why it happened, you know, maybe we don't know the details, we definitely don't know what happened before that. But, you know, everything came out of this tiny, infinitely small point. Everything seems to have just sort of bloomed out of this almost nothingness. And yeah, it's very definitely largely accepted that everything in the universe is all kind of one substance, even though it has turned into all these unique and different things. So if space and time, yeah, the best way to understand it is that space and time is just the way we experience the world. It's how the unique different parts of the universe can experience themselves as being unique, and each other as being unique. But in reality, space and time is an illusion, is maybe a bit of a strong term, but it is in some way an illusion. It's in some way just a way of understanding or a way of experiencing it, because on another level, it's all just one moment. It's all one moment in time. It's all just one moment in space-time. And that for me starts to explain an awful lot as to how well, it doesn't, but it starts to maybe move towards explaining why it seems that sometimes people's consciousnesses can connect through space and time, and why, yeah, sometimes it seems that we can influence things through space and time. It would make sense for me that, yeah, our experience of things being separate, of people being separate, other everything being separate from us, it is actually an illusion, and that sometimes something can just click into place, and maybe those two things can come together, two consciousnesses can come together. Now, I'm not altogether sure that that happens very much, but I have had people close to me who've had experiences that I completely believe, that are, you know, that you can't explain, and that moves towards explaining it. So what I'm trying to get at in this really long-winded way, is that I'm starting to see this whole other wealth of possibility within my worldview of pantheism. I'm starting to see how a monistic pantheistic belief can actually start to open up doors into achieving a greater connection with everything. And it's funny because this is exactly what I was aiming to do when I started out with my spiritual practice. I wanted to feel more connected. I wanted to be able to transcend the ego in ritual, and to have those kind of blissful experiences that people have when they meditate, or have transcendental experiences, where they feel kind of blissful and as though they are the universe, and, you know, where they feel that sense of connection. But I'm also starting to see how actually, if you can manage to forge that connection in your mind, if you can manage to really feel that connection, to let go of the ego, that maybe you're actually in a state where you are taking in information, all the information from the universe at once into your mind. I don't know. I'm not sure where I stand on that just yet. But it's certainly a possibility for me. And then I don't think I believe necessarily that you can necessarily then reach out, tweak the web, and change physical things in the world in the way that people believe they can with magic. But I'm definitely opening up more and more to the possibilities of that, to the possibilities of, through trance states and lucid dreaming and things like that, that you are actually opening yourself up to the web, that you are actually experiencing something much further beyond your actual brain. I was going to talk a lot more about the implications that this has for witchcraft and spirits and stuff like that, but I think I'll leave that for another day. I really hope this made a bit of sense, and I think I'll be making lots more videos of this kind in the future, because yeah, this is where I'm at. I have started to integrate a magical practice into my spiritual practice. I'm still trying to figure out how it can be part and parcel to my spiritual devotional practice, because I see it as being something slightly different. But more on that another time, I think. Thanks for watching, if you got through the whole thing. I am going to make a Tarot of the Gods video soon, but I just, you know, didn't have the time or the headspace this week to sit down in advance of making a video and make any notes whatsoever. So next week, I think. And I'll leave it there. Okay, thanks for watching, guys, and let me know thoughts or whatever. I do understand that some of what I'm saying here is going to be deviating pretty massively from some of your belief systems, and some of you might have originally come to my channel because you know, we're coming from a much more atheistic place like I was originally, and I don't know, some people maybe won't like the direction that I'm going with this, but I would ask you to keep an open mind and just say, you know, I did come from being a hardcore atheist for a while into this, and I can still very much appreciate that kind of perspective on the world, and I still very much believe that you can have a meaningful spiritual practice while having a completely naturalistic and even atheistic belief system. So yeah, okay, gonna go now. Bye.